Warning. I chain smoke and I say fuck a lot. But I accept myself for the way I am. I accept you too. Viewer discretion advised.
He was found at Steven Spielberg's LA mansion carrying duct tape, a box cutter, and handcuffs. He told police he wanted to rape the movie director.
BBC News, June 17, 1998. A man who stalked director Steven Spielberg has been jailed for 25 years in California. Mr. Spielberg told the court he feared stalker Jonathan Norman intended to, quote, rape or maim him. Norman, 31, planned to attack the Oscar-winning director in front of his wife, the court heard. And prosecutors said Norman was carrying a rape kit when he was arrested in the grounds of Mr. Spielberg's home. Norman, who was convicted in March, was sentenced under California's three strikes law, which increases penalties for repeat offenders. Norman had 2 previous felony convictions. He was found guilty of a plot to invade the director's mansion, hold him and his family hostage, and rape the director. Mr. Spielberg, who is famous for films such as E.T., Schindler's List, and Raiders of the Lost Ark, told the court, quote, had Jonathan Norman actually confronted me, I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, believe that I would have been raped or maimed or killed. If he's out on the street, I will live in fear. I place myself in your hands. The prospect that Jonathan Norman might have another opportunity to carry out his threats is beyond frightening to me. Superior Court Judge Stephen Suzukawa said Norman was, quote, obsessive and frightening. He added, quote, I think he does present a danger to society. The director was in Ireland working on a new film, Saving Private Ryan, when Norman broke into the grounds of his mansion last year. Norman was arrested after making 2 attempts to enter Spielberg's Pacific Palisades home in June and July of 1997. Police said Norman had a list of Mr. Spielberg's family members and associates. He was also carrying handcuffs, duct tape, and a razor knife when arrested. The prosecution called the equipment a, quote, rape kit. I just thought this whole thing was weird. This guy, for real, wanted to go break in and rape Steven Spielberg. He was motivated, too. What would bring someone to do that? Almost seems like it could be revenge. Later investigations showed that Norman had recorded the names of Spielberg's family members in his day planner, along with a shopping list, including items like eye masks, dog collars, and chloroform. He also leased a car similar to the one driven by Spielberg's wife, actress Kate Capshaw, in the hopes of getting past security guards at the couple's home, prosecutors said. During conversations with a former roommate and police, Norman openly acknowledged a desire to rape Spielberg at the time of his arrest. Norman was on parole for a 1995 incident in which he pleaded no contest to 2 counts of assault after driving his car toward a group of people during an argument. And Norman's attorney, Charles L. Krendler, said he planned to appeal the conviction, which he said was influenced by Spielberg's celebrity status. Quote, I don't feel Norman is the type of person that the 3 strikes law is designed to put away for the rest of his life, said Krendler, who told the judge his client deserved leniency because he suffers from methamphetamine-induced psychosis and other mental problems. Quote, if the victim involved was anybody that wasn't as famous and powerful as Mr. Spielberg, this case was never going to be brought. Deputy District Attorney Rhonda Saunders said the stalking law Norman violated, quote, is there to try to save lives, and it doesn't matter if the victim is a celebrity or the victim is a person like you or me. During his 90-minute testimony, Spielberg said he had increased security on his movie sets and at his home. Spielberg was shown several pieces of paper containing Norman's writings. He identified at least 24 names of friends and business associates on them, including David Geffen and Jeffrey Katzenberg, his partners in the DreamWorks studio. The director was briefly cross-examined by the defense about his daily routines and security measures, and he also said he never personally received any letters or phone calls from Norman. Spielberg did not make eye contact with Norman during the proceedings. But during one brief break, while lawyers and the judge conferred, Spielberg glanced at Norman, but the man never caught the director's eye. but Norman appeared to smirk as the director entered the courtroom by a rear door and glanced occasionally at Spielberg during his testimony. From Whisper of Fear, the true story of the prosecutor who stalks the Stalkers, Rhonda B. Saunders. Chuck was an ordinary-looking guy, very much in love with the handsome Jonathan, who did not return his affection. Markovich said that Norman refused to have sex with him, but did live with him from time to time, and always allowed Chuck to support him with the meager proceeds from a string of low-paying jobs. Chuck discussed the photos of Spielberg's and Geffen's heads pasted over naked male bodies. He recalled how Norman had said he wanted to rape Spielberg. He talked about buying the star map and cruising the Spielberg residence. The People, plaintiff and respondent versus Jonathan Norman, defendant and appellant. Decided October 28, 1999. Facts. On June 23, 1997, Steven Spielberg, the victim, left his Pacific Palisades residence and flew to Ireland, where he was joined by his wife and children. On June 29, Norman drove a rented Jeep Cherokee to Spielberg's residence and pushed the intercom button at the gate. When Stephen Lopez, a security guard, came to the gate, Norman said he worked for Spielberg's partner, David Geffen, and demanded to see Spielberg. Lopez knew the Spielbergs were out of town and told Norman to leave. Norman glared at Lopez, then left. Several days later, Norman drove a friend, Charles Markovich, by Spielberg's home, opened his day planner, and showed Markovich a photograph of Spielberg's head affixed to a photo of a naked male body. On July 9, Norman told Markovich that he was going to climb over the wall at Spielberg's residence and rape him. About 1:25 a.m. on July 11, a West Tech security officer, William Hunter, noticed a Land Rover parked in an opposition across the street from Spielberg's residence. Norman, who had replaced the rented Jeep with the rented Land Rover, was sitting behind the wheel. When Hunter rejected Norman's tale of engine problems and told Norman to leave, Norman complied. A few hours later, around 7 a.m., West Tech responded to several calls reporting a man in the backyards of the homes near Spielberg's residence. Manuel Hernandez saw Norman, 5-foot stick in hand, running over lawns and jumping fences. Hernandez gave chase and found Norman hiding under some bushes. When Norman raised his hands in response to a command from Hernandez, Norman dropped his day planner, revealing cutout photographs of Spielberg. Norman told Hernandez he was, quote, running away from the jackal. Jackal? And also said he was Spielberg's, quote, newly adopted son. The police arrived and took custody of Norman. When he was interviewed by the police, Norman identified himself as, quote, David Spielberg, and explained that he had been chased by, quote, jackals, ferocious dogs owned by Spielberg. Oh, okay. Norman was released about 10:30 a.m. About 5:10 p.m., Norman returned to Spielberg's residence and parked the Land Rover about 100 feet from Spielberg's driveway, directly in front of Lopez's car. About 20 minutes later, Lopez saw the Land Rover, recognized Norman, called another security officer, and told him to call the police. As Lopez watched, Norman backed the Land Rover into the driveway and up to the gate as though he was trying to push it open, then drove away. When the police arrived, they found Norman's unoccupied car about 2 blocks from Spielberg's residence. The officers waited until Norman returned, detained him and searched him, finding handcuffs, a box cutter and duct tape on his person and in his briefcase, 2 pairs of handcuffs, a day planner with photos of Spielberg, and parking tickets issued for both the Jeep and the Land Rover. Razor blades were found in the car. When asked what he was doing in the area, Norman said he had an appointment with Spielberg about a screenplay that involved one man raping another man, and that the handcuffs and tape were props. No screenplay was found in the car. Norman was placed on a 72-hour hold, which was later extended. On July 14, a security agent notified Spielberg's lawyer, Bruce Raymer, about the events of June 29 and July 11. On July 17, Norman was released from custody and Raymer was notified. Raymer, in turn, contacted Spielberg in Ireland and told him about Norman's conduct. Raymer also told Spielberg that Norman had the names of Spielberg's wife and children in his day planner, that he had been carrying handcuffs, duct tape, and a box cutter, and that Norman had a record of prior assaultive conduct. Spielberg, afraid for his family and for himself, authorized additional security measures at the Pacific Palisades house for his mother's LA residence and for himself and his family in Ireland and later in England. On July 18, Norman was arrested on an unrelated parole violation. On July 21, and again on August 4, he confessed to the police that he had gone to Spielberg's home on the night of July 11, intending to rape Spielberg, and that, for weeks before that night, had been sexually attracted to and obsessed with Spielberg. Norman explained that he had conducted research to learn all he could about Spielberg, that he had purchased the handcuffs and duct tape for use in his planned rape, and that he had attempted to jump Spielberg's fence but had been chased away by Spielberg's dogs. On July 23, Norman confessed to Rick Vigil, the person in charge of Spielberg's security, confirming the statements he had made to the police and explaining that, had he gained entry and had Spielberg's wife been present, he planned to, quote, tie her up and make her watch while he raped Spielberg. On July 29, Raymer told Spielberg about Norman's plan to rape him. Spielberg, concerned that Norman might be released from custody, kept the increased security arrangements in place. In Norman's personal effects, the police found a notebook of his writings. Norman wrote about, quote, pursuing Mr. Spielberg to become one of his gay lovers, with details about some of the specific things he wanted to do to Spielberg. A map of movie stars' homes with Spielberg's name and address marked in ink, articles about Spielberg, and documents listing the names and other information about various members of the Spielberg family. His sisters, children, wife, former wife, and mother. There were more razors. There was an article chronicling the stalking conduct of John Lennon's killer. By indictment, Norman was charged with 1 count of stalking, with allegations that he had suffered 2 prior serious felony convictions, both in 1995, both for assault with a deadly weapon, and served 1 prior prison term. At trial, the people presented evidence of the facts summarized above. In addition, Spielberg testified that he was still afraid of Norman and believed he was the object of a, quote, mission that Norman was capable of carrying out. The jury rejected Norman's defense. He claimed his heavy drug use, that he had the requisite intent, and convicted Norman of stalking. The allegations were found true, and Norman was sentenced to state prison for a term of 25 to life. He appeals, but it was shot down. You know what's weird about this? Just 2 weeks ago, Michaela Spielberg, Steven's adopted daughter, came out saying she was sexually abused as a kid.
From outside my family and not from anybody of notable presence. Just from, scumbag monsters who were looking at my vulnerability going, that's the one.
So he had extra security around, and she was sexually abused by somebody not in the family or close to the family. How is this possible? From People, October 18, 2002. Steven Spielberg curbs alleged stalker. Steven Spielberg has filed a restraining order against a woman who allegedly stalked the director and claimed he implanted a mind-controlled device in her brain. Jonathan wasn't his only stalker. According to court papers obtained by People, an LA judge granted Spielberg's request against Diana Louisa Napoli, 47, who Spielberg's security team believes suffers from a delusional disorder and poses, quote, a serious risk of violent confrontation with the filmmaker. In court papers, Spielberg's staff members said they grew concerned after Napoli told them of plans to confront the director at a movie premiere. Napoli claimed in a 13-page manifesto that she believed Spielberg and his wife Kate Capshaw were part of a, quote, satanic cult that implanted a microchip in her brain called a, quote, soul catcher that was controlling her. She allegedly believed the cult was operating out of Spielberg's basement. In his own court declaration, Spielberg, 55, described her actions as, quote, alarming and threatening. Quote, I am concerned for my safety and security and for the safety and security of my family and others around me. He also pointed out that, to state the obvious, I am not involved with any form of manipulating Miss Napoli's mind or body through remote technology or otherwise. This lady had some pseudonyms, including Karen, quote, Curio Jones. Diana Napoli is an ex-therapist who believes there is a vast satanic conspiracy attempting to cover up widespread ritual abuse. Now with this lady, it's hard to tell if she's just crazy or if she's just been extremely discredited, because she sure has. But then again, do you know who she brought to court? She was fighting against Michael Aquino. If she was fighting Michael Aquino, I could well see that she was very discredited. And back to Spielberg. Do you want to know how I can even conceive this being a possibility? We have to refer to Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by David McGowan. Laurel Canyon, covert ops in the dark heart of the hippie dream. If we go to the bottom of page 180, he's talking about Altamont.
One of the young cameramen working for the Maisel brothers that day, as it turns out, was a guy by the name of George Lucas. It is unclear whether it was Lucas who captured the conveniently unobstructed footage of the murder. Not long after, Lucas would begin a meteoric rise to the very top of the Hollywood food chain. He would be joined there by another film director by the name of Steven Spielberg. The two of them would emerge as arguably the most critically acclaimed and influential filmmakers of their generation. Just as the second wave of Laurel Canyon bands, with names like the Eagles and CSN, would transform the music industry from a community of artists into a vast money-making machine, ushering in the era of stadium concerts, multi-million-selling albums, and unprecedented profits. Spielberg and Lucas would perform a similar trick with the film business, producing blockbusters like E.T., Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, and Star Wars. It seems perfectly natural, then, that in the mid to late 1960s, USC film student Spielberg was living on Lookout Mountain in Laurel Canyon.
Lookout Mountain in Laurel Canyon, and what's there? Lookout Mountain Laboratory. Or Lookout Mountain Air Force Station is a former defense site which today is a private residence in Laurel Canyon. You know who lives there now? Jared Leto. The 10,000 square foot facility was built on 2.5 acres in 1941 as a World War II air defense center to coordinate Los Angeles area radar installations. When the studio was established in 1947, its purpose was kept secret. The studio consisted of one large soundstage, a film laboratory, 2 screening rooms, 4 editing rooms, an animation and still photo department, sound mixing studio, and numerous climate-controlled film vaults. The studio could process both 35mm and 16mm color motion picture film as well as black and white and color still photographs. It was a secret military station, and he lived there while going to school. And from Steven Spielberg, groundbreaking director, Irving landed a major role in the horror movie Carrie. Spielberg and Irving began seeing each other, and the relationship grew. Before long, Irving moved in with Spielberg in his home near Laurel Canyon. A few months later, they moved into a huge 5-year-old house in Coldwater Canyon. Spielberg and Irving split up. They had been together for 4 years and engaged for 3 months. Spielberg was devastated by the breakup. It was the most upsetting event in his life since his parents' divorce, but he admitted that it helped him grow up emotionally. Quote, I've spent so many years hiding from pain and fear behind a camera, he said. Quote, I avoided all the growing up pains by being too busy making movies. I lost myself in the world of film. So right now, in my early 30s, I'm experiencing delayed adolescence. Fucking stoned. I got motherfucking spaceship. Oh, fuck. Oh, cool.
Oh, I got it.